Our New Year's sermon, first Sunday of the year tradition is to kind of do a special New Year's sermon, and then we move on. That next week we'll be back into the Gospel of Luke that we've been studying, started studying last year as a church. We'll continue to study it this year in 2018, going through the Gospel of Luke, where we're attempting to learn and understand who Jesus is and what he is all about. But I want to do a special sermon today on God who makes all things new. That's the title of my sermon. There's something about a new year, isn't there? A new year. It brings with it the sense of opportunity and change, and often a hope or a wish or desire for things to be better, right? I mean, you guys feel that? You sense that kind of feeling when the new year comes? If you had a good year last year, you're probably amped and excited for this year, looking forward to having another good year this year and re-experiencing and re-upping all those things. If you had a rough year last year, maybe you kind of felt like you sort of limped into the end of the year, and you're just we're thinking, man, I can't wait for this year to be over. I had a few moments like that myself last year when I started kind of longing and waiting for 2018 to come. So I've actually been thinking about this day and this particular sermon for a while. I think I picked this text and this sermon back in June when I snapped my arm in half and was laying in a hospital bed having to have surgery on my arm. And I was just thinking, man, I can't wait for a new year. This year sucks. So it's here. Thanks be to God. Made it 2018. We're here. In those moments, and there were several of them for me last year, where I found myself wanting the year to be over, wanting a fresh, new, and clean start. I did what I think God wants us to do whenever we face difficult things in our lives, and that's to turn to His Word, His book, and to see what He has to say about it. And as I began to think about my desire for a new year, repeatedly God brought this certain passage from His book to my heart and mind, a passage in the book of Revelation, the last chapter of the Bible, where God promises to make all things new. All things new is the title of my sermon. I really want to focus on Revelation chapter 21, verse 5, but we're going to go ahead and read all of it, verses 1 through 8, the context there to help us understand verse 5. So why don't you go ahead and stand with me in the honor of these words being sent from God to us through the hands and the mouth of the Apostle John. So this is Revelation chapter 21, verses 1 through 8. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And as I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be His people, and God Himself will be with them as their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more, neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore, for the former things have passed away." And He who was seated on the throne said, "Behold, I am making all things new." Also He said, "Write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true." And He said to me, "It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty I will give from the spring of the water of life without payment. The one who conquers will have this heritage, and I will be his God, and he will be my son. But as for the cowardly, the faithless, the detestable, as for the murderers, the sexually immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars, their portion will be in the lake that burns with fire and sulfur, which is the second death." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Let me take a seat. All things new. All things new. Where I want to begin with today is first talking about the innate human desire and need to look forward, to look ahead. Most children, especially if they have older siblings, they look up to those who are older and they want to be like them. They want to be older. I'm always asking my kids whenever it's their birthday, "Man, you're getting too old, too big, too fast. How about we go back a year?" Like my youngest daughter just turned 5 in December. I was like, "How about instead of going from 4 to 5, we go back to being 3? You were so cute when you were 3. And she's like, "No, that's not happening." Kids in school, when you're in grade school, they idolize the older kids, and the next grade's up, looking forward to becoming older in the next grade. High school kids, once you're in high school, you start planning and dreaming of going to college, looking ahead to that next step. There's kind of a brief breakdown with college kids who really don't look forward to the next step of working. I think that's a millennial problem, but they do look forward to making a lot of money. And so eventually they get going with real life, and then they look forward to life and family with a spouse and children. And then after that, I guess you look forward to, dying a slow death in a retirement home or something. So, well, maybe you enjoy your money in, retirement for a little bit before you can't anymore. Whether most of us realize it or not, we have this innate wish and desire or dream about how our life will go. The details are usually somewhat fuzzy, but we always imagine a kind of a happy life of us doing well at some point, having a spouse and children and an enjoyable job and then maybe then becoming grandparents, just enjoying all of life. We imagine a good life for ourselves. And what I'm getting at is I think that the way that God has wired us, the way that He has designed and created us, is to have a future orientation. To have a future orientation. If you look at the Bible from the very beginning and throughout all of its pages, the Bible really has this future orientation to it where it looks ahead. God creates mankind, Adam and Eve, and then He lays out a promise and a plan for how to live and how to do it well. When mankind blows it, then He steps in with guys like Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, and he gives them this promise for the future that they all take hold of and they follow. Same thing with the nation of Israel, God's plan for His people. It's the same thing when Jesus comes on the scene, and He calls these 12 disciples, and He calls them to this future life that they will be a part of through following Him. And then it's the same thing when Jesus goes back to heaven and He leaves us with this mission to complete until this grand conclusion at the end where He returns and He makes all things new. The Bible has this future orientation to it where we look ahead, and we're called to look ahead in what God promises. And what we have in the book of Revelation in its final 2 chapters is a picture of that grand conclusion and what happens in the end. Part of what makes God God is that He is outside of space and time, and He's greater than it, and He rules over it. So God knows all of the past and the present and the future collectively and perfectly. God knows it all. That's part of what makes God God. If God knows the future, and if He has, in fact, told us some things about it through these special words that He had guys write that have become the Bible, then we have to ask why God thinks it's good for us to know some of that stuff. Why He had this written down for us to read and take in. I think the answer is that God knows that we need something better to look forward to than a retirement home. And He actually originally made us as a human race, a race that is intended to live forever enjoying His creation and all of His goodness. He's made us as a people with vision that were originally intended to live forever. Death came afterward. So I'm personally really looking forward to 2018, this new year, and I think one of the best things that we can do as a people who are seeking to love God and to know Him and to worship Him and to follow Him is to root our hopes and our desires in the future promise that God has given us to make all things new. To unpack that, I got 3 points for us today: God things, broken things, and new things. My prayer today is that we would really walk away with this confidence and conviction that God is truly making all things new. With this first point, God things, I want to focus first on just real simple, the nature of God Himself. Verse 5 says He's seated on a throne, and then He says, "Behold, I am." Behold's like this attention-getting word saying, hey, listen up, like, get a hold of this. This part, this is really important for you to know. Behold, and then He speaks His name, I am. I am simply the to-be verb, but it's also the first name that God ever gave for Himself. Back in The Old Testament, Moses asked God, he's like, what's your name? God simply said, I am. I am. God repeats his name in verse 6, and then he gives further details about what it means for him to be the great I am. Whenever you see I am in the Bible, those are important words. In verse 6, he says, I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. Book of Revelation was originally written in Greek, and Alpha is the first letter in the Greek alphabet, and Omega is the last letter. So is this simply God saying, I am the A to the Z, the beginning and the end of all history? Now notice, it says here God is seated on a throne. This is a picture of God then as a king. He's the king over all of creation, over all of history, from A to Z, the beginning and the end. The Bible talks about this picture of God in numerous places throughout its pages, God's kingship, that he is a king who rules over all. He sits high on a throne, lifted up, and he's surrounded with angels flying about him. As the king, he rules over time and all things. Nothing ever happens that God doesn't see and plan. He sees and plans it all. Everything from A to Z, the beginning to the end, has been ordered and superintended by him. And his promise to make all things new has been the plan all along. That was his plan from the beginning, the grand conclusion. And this is, by the way, this is Jesus speaking from the throne as king. 7 times in the Gospel of John, another book that John who wrote Revelation wrote, he records Jesus saying 7 times that he is the I am, that Jesus is this I am, the same God as the God of the Old Testament Bible. He says to one group on one occasion, before Abraham was, I am. And they're like really confused. They're like, wait, dude, you're only like 30 years old. He is the I am. And when Jesus dies on the cross and then he rises again, he's then called the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And after his resurrection, he ascends to heaven and he takes his place seated on the throne where Jesus is now, currently. So what Jesus, speaking from the throne of heaven, wants you and I to hear today are these words, behold, I am making all things new. Behold, I am making all things new. And just to be sure we don't miss how important and critical it is for us knowing and believing this, he adds, and write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. These words are trustworthy and true. Jesus wanted these words, I am making all things new, to be recorded for all of time because we need to know that his promise to make all things new is trustworthy and true. He is doing it and he will do it. You can count on it. It's as sure as the ground that we walk on, the air that we breathe, and the sun that rises and sets in our sky. This is true. He is making all things new. And what a great promise for us in 2018, huh? That no matter what happens, the good and the bad and everything in between, we can know and believe that God is in control and that he is at work. So God is the God. He will be the God of 2018. See, when things happen that we don't expect, that we don't want, that we can't even understand, we can look to it and just say, I am. God is the I am of this situation. He is at work. Somehow he is making, through this, he's making all things new, and he will make this new. He will take the bad and the evil, and he will work it for good somehow. It also means that when the good things happen, we can look to them and say, that's God. That's the I am. That's the I am at work, making all things new. Thank you, God, for your goodness. Thanks be to God. The great medical doctor turned preacher, Dr. Martin Lloyd-Jones, he said this: God controls everything. The time element in particular. It is God who decides the time when everything is to happen. God is overall controlling all and timing everything in his infinite wisdom. I know of nothing which is more comforting and reassuring than to know that the Lord still reigns, that he is still the sovereign Lord of the universe. The sovereignty of God, that's his rule as king over all, is One of the cardinal doctrines without which we do not understand really our Christian faith. This is something we really need to know. It's trustworthy and true. See, these are God things. These are things that belong only to God. Only God can order history and human decisions and human lives and the events that occur in nature and time. And only God can connect all of it and work in all of it together to make something good and beautiful and new. None of us can do that or guarantee that, but God can. God can. His promise is trustworthy and true. He will make all things new. So listen, in 2018, this year that is coming for you and I, the most sure thing that you can know, the most helpful thing that we can believe is God's promise that He is at work and He is making all things new. This is, friends, my biggest prayer just for myself in 2018 is that I would be able to believe that. I would simply be able to walk with God this year, to trust in Him, to trust in His work, to believe that He is in control and that He knows what He's doing and that He actually cares for me as doing something good and new. That's good. So this year, don't put your hope in everything going the way that you want it to. It's probably not going to work that way. If you think that way, you'll likely be disappointed. Put your hope in God and His promise to do something new in and through you. And if things, if they do go the way that they want them to, then give God the credit and the glory for doing something new and good in your life. That comes from Him. It's a blessing from above. You see, what we really need isn't something, some happening or some circumstance. What we really need is a quality of life. And knowing God, knowing and believing that He is at work and that He is God over all. The new that we really need and long for comes from Him, that He's the one who makes all things new. Are there things today that perhaps maybe God would want you to let go of in this coming year, entrusting your plans and your desires to Him? Something today that the Lord would maybe want you to release and just give up and say, Lord, this is yours. Whatever happens with it, I'm okay with it. I trust you in this. I trust you either way to work in me the good that I need, the new that I need. The promise of God to make all things new, it's a precious promise. So let's hold on to that tightly this year. On our next point, broken things, I want to dig into why things need to be made new. And to oversimplify it, it's because everything got broken. Everything got broken. Verse 4 tells us that part of God's work in making all things new is to wipe away every tear from their eyes. And there shall be no mourning, there shall be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore, for the former things have passed away. Tears, death, mourning, pain. None of those things were part of God's original creation when He first made things new for the very first time. After God created everything, He said it was good. Behold, it's good, very good. Everything that God created. God told Adam and Eve how to enjoy life, His creation, and life with Him. But Adam and Eve, they succumbed to temptation, thinking that there was something better that God was perhaps holding out on, and as a result, then everything got broken. Pain entered in. Mourning began. Death infected everything. Human beings and even the land itself. Tears, death, mourning, and pain. Did any of you experience that in 2017? Pain and hardship. Physical pain in your body. Emotional pain. Mourning. Times of sadness or weariness. Maybe even depression. Death of a loved one or friend. Miscarriage. Or maybe even just many of the tragedies that we really experienced collectively as a nation this year. Tears? Did you shed any tears last year? Tears, death, mourning, and pain. Nobody likes these things or desires them. That's because we're were not made for them. They're foreigners. They're intruders. They come in from the outside. They do not belong to the human race and to the world. These things. They're outsiders. That's why we hate them and why we buck against them, because they are not meant to be. These things are not meant to be. Think about it. Nobody ever says, man, I just really love it when I get sick. I hope I get sick soon because I just really love throwing up, or when I'm really congested, and when my throat is all sore and it feels like razor blades. I love that. I hope I get sick a lot in 2018. Yeah, I really want that. Nobody says man, this coming year, I hope I just have a miserable year. I hope I get really sad. I hope somebody I really care about dies. I hope somebody just really hurts me and it just wrecks me. And nobody thinks like that. Nobody says things like this, because pain and death and mourning and tears, they're outsiders. They're not meant to be. They don't belong. We cannot help but hate them. And rightly so, we want them to be gone. And the promise of God here in His Word today is that they shall be no more. They shall be no more. A day is coming when they will be done away with all once and for all. You see, here's the truth is, this brokenness affects everyone. We're all broken. You're all broken. I turned 40 this year. I know I have a lot to learn still. One thing I've learned getting this far is that I can't do it. When I was in my 20s and even in my early 30s, I was pretty optimistic. I look out at the world and think that you can succeed and you can do it better than this guy. And if I work hard and I do that, I'm better than the rest. I can take this thing on, but I've come to realize, especially in the last few years of my life, is that I'm a broken man. I'm broken. I look physically at my hands. I have literal scars running down both of my hands, 4 surgeries, 1 on my left hand and 3 on my right. And I don't just have physical scars. I've got a lot of deep emotional scars too. I've got a lot of war wounds where people have hurt me deeply. I've also got self-inflicted wounds, where in my sin I've made foolish decisions that have hurt other people and they've hurt me, hurt myself. I've realized that no matter how hard I try, I don't have what it takes. I can't do it on my own. Fear, guilt, shame, I got all of it. I'm broken. I'm a broken man. We are a broken people. We're honest. We're a broken people, but God, He is a God who knows how to heal, and He promises to heal the broken. Listen to Psalm 147:3 about God heals the brokenhearted. He binds up their wounds. Chief physician. Jesus quoted the prophet Isaiah. He said this, quoting from Isaiah 61, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me." This is Jesus speaking, "because the Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the afflicted. He sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to comfort all who sorrow, to give to them beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, the garment of praise for the Spirit of heaven, so that they may be called oaks of righteousness, the planting of the Lord, that He may be glorified." Jesus came to heal the brokenhearted. He came to heal you and I. This is the promise of our God for all who turn to Him and to trust in Him. Maybe you're here today and you have never really done that, never really put your trust in Jesus as your Savior. You've never really admitted your brokenness, your need for healing. Make 2018, make this year the year that you start to walk with the Lord. For those of us who do, the Lord, are you trusting in Him with all of your life? And I want us to see something today. I want us to see how God does this, how he heals the broken hearted. Look again at verse 3 and 4 in our passage from Revelation. He says, behold, the dwelling place of God's with them. He dwells with them. They're his people. He'd be with them. And look what he does. He wipes away the tears from their eyes. He himself will wipe away the tears. He himself will do away with the death, the sorrow, the pain. The picture here, really, it's of God getting up off the throne and coming down to us, to our level, and in tenderness, embracing us and wiping away the tears. This week, I got home from work one of the days, I forget if it was Wednesday or Thursday, and I found my oldest daughter in her closet, just sitting by herself, which she does sometimes when she wants to be alone. And I came home and I'm like, hey, babe, is everything all right? And I looked at her and she just had this look in her face that it wasn't. And so I mean she had a, they were back to school and some rough things from school, I guess. But I just looked at her and said, honey, do you need a hug? And she just nodded her head and she hugged me. She grabbed onto me so tight. And so I just squeezed her tighter. And she started crying and she was sobbing. And so with one hand, I just held her head. And with the other hand, I began to wipe away the tears off her face. I said, sweetheart, Daddy's got you. I always got you. Friends, church, our God is a tender God. He's got us. He got up off the throne and he came down to us, entering into our world, entering into the suffering and the pain and the sorrow, and gave up his life on a cross for us. He did it so that he could do away with death and all that comes with it forevermore. Jesus rose from the dead, proving to us this promise of new life, of all things new, the death of death itself, along with all the pain, hardship, and tears that have come with it. He is making all things new. That's his number one goal in your life, is to make you new. Hear it again. He's making all things new. He's got us. He will wipe away every tear from your eye. He'll wipe away all the painful things of the past. They'll be gone. This is where we come in with that line at verse 4 about the former things. It says the former things have passed away. God has called us to look ahead, not to look backward. We look ahead as his people to what he's called us to and what he's promised to us. We don't look backward and wallow in the sins and the failures and the hurts of the past. We're to look ahead. Apostle Paul says it this way in the book of Philippians in the Bible. One thing I do, forgetting what lies behind and straining forward to what lies ahead, I press on toward the goal of the prize of the upward call in Christ Jesus. We strain forward, looking to what's ahead, what he's called us to in Christ Jesus, his promise to make all things new. That's the prize. He's wiping away all the junk of the past, and he's making all things new, new life that follows for us. Today, are there some hurts that you've experienced that you need healing from? Maybe what you really need today is a hug. Do you need God to wipe away some of the tears? Tell you, it'll be all right. I've got you. For hurt people, we need a God who can wipe away the tears. There's some things from 2017, or maybe even further back, 2007 or 97, or even older than that, maybe some deep, long-standing wounds that God would want you today is just to let go of it. It's time. This is the year to let go of it. Some things of the past that has been eating you up, and God wants you to forget those things and to put them behind you and to move ahead and following him. God's promise is trustworthy and it's true, Jesus said. He will do that. God will do that for you. He is a God who will make all things new. He'll make you new. Well, let's move on to our final point for today, new things. And this last point, I want to talk about what God is actually doing when he makes all things new. When I prepare for a sermon, I not only study the original language that it was written in, whether it's in Greek or Hebrew, but I also read commentaries from other scholars and experts from various opinions and perspectives. I try to do my best to do what the Bible says, to study, to show yourself approved before you preach. However, oftentimes my most favorite study resources and things that I do to try to get a hold of what God is saying, most helpful things to study for my sermon is my kids. So I was driving them to school one day this week, and so I said, hey, girls, I want to read this passage from the Bible to you and get your take on it. You know, what do you think about this? And so I just simply said, there's this Jesus is on the throne, and he says, behold, I am making all things new. What do you think about that? You know, you had something that was new, and then something happened, and then it wasn't new anymore. What do you think about Jesus saying, I'll make all things new? My middle daughter, she piped up, and she told me about this stuffed animal duck that she used to have named Quacky. I don't remember Quacky, but apparently she said when she got Quacky, she loved it, but then she took him outside, and she was playing, and they got all dirty, and then she said the thing doesn't work anymore where you squeeze his stomach and he quacks. And so she said, Daddy, when we go to heaven, can I have a new Quacky? And I told her, I said, for sure, God said all things. I don't know what else he's supposed to say. I don't know. But that kind of stuck with me because, you know, isn't it so true that so often we want something and then we finally get it? I mean, we're so stoked on it. It's brand new and like, this is sweet. I mean, fresh, clean, super nice, and you're all about it. You know, we just had Christmas. Think about it. You get some good Christmas gifts this year you were stoked on? Or maybe think about it this way. You remember what you got for Christmas last year? I was trying to think about it. I couldn't remember. I had to ask my wife. It's like, what did you get me for Christmas last year? I know it was something big. Like, what was it? Last year she got me this watch, a nice Nixon watch. My God, I was stoked. I wore it like every day. But you know what? After the year, it kind of got like scuffed up on it. I'm like, now I just one of 4 watches I rotate depending on my outfit, you know. Isn't it like that every time we get something new? I mean, new car, it's great, but then after a while, it's get a new house, you're so stoked on it, and then, I don't know, the walls get dirty and it gets old, you know, need a new couch. I don't know. Or like, think about, this is a perfect one. New iPhone or Pixel, I know now, is super cool. Like, so great! Lasts for a few months, you know, and then the new version comes out. Gosh, doesn't everything new eventually loses its luster, right? That's a fact of life. Everything new eventually loses its luster. And so then what happens is we keep on chasing more new things and better things. But God is promising in our passage is the ultimate new, the real new, the new that never wears out and never gets old. And here's something really important for us to understand about it. God's promise is not to make all new things, but to make all things new. Notice that? It promise isn't him making all new things, but making all things new. This is really what it is. It's a transformation of everything. Transforming everything. The newness of God that he's talking about here, it's a renewal of things. It's a restoration of things to their original new quality where it doesn't run out, doesn't get old, doesn't get broken, and never loses its luster. The true new. Now, this newness, it may and likely does include physical things, because if you read on in Revelation 21, there's talk about physical streets and gates and city and decor and all kinds of stuff, so maybe there actually is hope for Quacky. It includes physical things. But what really matters, I believe, is the relational newness that transforms how we experience the newness of God and what it institutes. This quality of life that the passage focuses on, this quality of life with God that he promises. Look at it with me. Verse 6, the verse right after verse 5, that was our main verse for today, promise of God making all things new. God, he says how we experience this newness. It's to the thirsty I will give from the spring of the water of life without payment. That's the promise. God himself gives the water of life to all who thirst. This is the promise. Verse 3 we read earlier said that God, he'll dwell with man and God with his people, where he continually provides this water of life, this newness of life. So, how God makes all things new is by bringing us into this special, intimate relationship, and where he satisfies the thirst and the longing of our souls. Satisfy that. No longer is there any separation between us and him, with us running or hiding or getting distracted by this and that or thinking that there's something better than him. God is once again in the garden, walking with his creatures like he did with Adam and Eve, although now it's a garden city full of lots of people, and there's a fountain where we drink from the waters of life from him. And here's the kicker. We do nothing to earn it. It's without payment, verse 6 says. It's a free gift without payment. And here's the really funny thing about this section. Verse 8 has all that gnarly stuff about what happens to people with that reject God and immorality and sin and get into all kinds of stuff that end up getting thrown into hell. But verse 7 says that those who conquer, they get the heritage of God and this special privilege of being his sons and his daughters, with him as their loving father. So how do you conquer then? Like, how do you not end up in that lake of fire? How do you conquer? Well, not by earning it. It's without payment. Can't offer a payment. So doing good won't cut it. So not being a liar, not being an idolater, not being a sorcerer, not being a sex addict, not being a murderer, none of those things can get you into God's kingdom. I mean, even if you don't do any of those things, you won't conquer that way. You can't conquer by earning it and then offering your goodness to God as a payment to heaven, where you then get to drink from the waters of life from God. No, verse 6 says, look at verse 6. The way that you conquer, we go back, it's by thirsting. To the thirsty. The way that you conquer is by being thirsty and drinking. It's to the thirsty that God gives the waters of life without payment. It's by thirsting and drinking from God that we conquer all of those things. This is the promise of God, that he will satisfy all who thirst. David said it well in the Bible in Psalm 63:1, says it this way, "Oh God, you are my God. Earnestly I seek you, for my soul. It thirsts for you. My flesh faints for you as a dry and weary land where there is no water." The soul thirsts. And nothing in this world can satisfy our thirst. Nothing that the world has to offer. But those who turn to God and they drink from the depths of his love and his kindness and his forgiveness and his grace and the new life that he offers to us through Jesus, he satisfies. He dwells with us. He gives the water of life. We're to thirst and then to drink in the living water of the life of God. So, friends, the call for us in 2018 is really to do as the guy from the Dos Equis commercial says, to stay thirsty, my friends. Huh? Stay thirsty, my friends. There is a newness of life that comes from knowing God and walking with him. We can experience that here and now in part through Jesus. And one day, when we get to Revelation 21, we'll experience it in full. So we have to look forward to. I believe with all my heart that God is going to do some incredible and beautiful and wonderful new things in your life and mine and our church in 2018. I'm really excited about that. There's some new things ahead. He is making all things new. Our job is simply to drink it in and enjoy it. Enjoy life with God. So one final verse for us today I think sums it up well from Romans 6:4. Says, Christ is raised from the dead by the glory of God the Father, so we too might walk in newness of life. Newness of life. There's new things ahead for all of us who drink from the waters of life without payment from Jesus. So let's walk with him this year and see our joy ever increase. God things, broken things, new things. We started out today talking about how God's wired within us a desire to look to the future. The future he promises for his people is a good one where all broken things are restored and renewed. He's making all things new for us. All things new.